Well, let's get started then. So, welcome everybody to Montessori Lives once again. And we're so honored this evening to have Sister Eileen with us, Eileen Savage. And Eileen, you have such a, a long and distinguished career in Montessori that we want to talk about so many in so many aspects, so many ways. But would you maybe start us off by telling your Montessori story? How did you discover Montessori?
Well, I had been in traditional learning when way back in the beginning of the 70s. I trained in those days was infants primary and secondary, so I trained as an infants teacher. And after 21 years, Sister Kathleen had been over to England and did Lynn Lawrence's Montessori course in 89, 90. And so she suggested I go and observe, which I did, and over in Canberra. And I got information from Pat Hilson, who was in Sydney at the time. And so I joined the 1993 course, which they moved to Melbourne because they wanted to give the Melbourne girls a chance. And so there was just myself I left Junee, which is near Wagga, I don't know whether you know, and Annie was from Singapore, and the rest were from Melbourne, and one, of course, was Amy. So, but I was
Erkin.
Yes, so lucky to have Pat as a lecturer. She gave me that love for Montessori because it just oozed out of her, and I was just so lucky that after the course there was a place at Red Hill in Canberra, and as an assistant, I really didn't feel confident as a director. So there was an assistant's job, and I took that at Red Hill, which is, it was because in those days they had 3 campuses. And so then Geraldine left, and she was the director, and she went over to Ireland because she was an Irish girl, because her husband had his work took him over there. So I was there for two terms as the director then, and then I went back to assistant, and then Geraldine started her family. So then I took over from her, and I had 21 wonderful years there at Red Hill, just one room, my own, just three staff. It was a lovely little play area. It was wonderful.
And this is after 21 years?
21 years,
traditional,
yes.
in traditional settings, and then 21 years again in Montessori at Redgum.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So maybe Pat Hilson is a bit of a legend in Australian Montessori. Maybe can you tell some stories? What memories do you have of what influence she had on you in her training?
She was firm, but oh dear, she really gave you, like, every morning I'd hop on the tram because I stayed at East Melbourne, and the course was at South Melbourne in a Church of England church hall. So we had to pack up every weekend, but that was all right because the shelves had wheels, so that was fine. But and I'd go early so that I could talk to her, and Deirdre was also her assistant. I can't think of Deirdre's other name, but she was from Melbourne, and you know, I'd have a lot of fun with them because I hadn't been in the city at all. I'd been in country towns that, you know, I saw people with all colour hair. I'd never seen anything like that. This is way back in 1993. So nowadays it's, you know, it's sort of a lot different. But she just encouraged you so much, and she, you know, our little group, there was just 11 of us, but gosh, though, we were a very close little knit group, and I think it was because of Pat and Deirdre, the way they were as a pair and guiding us.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we were all very, very different people, very different, but I still keep in contact with some of them, which has been really lovely, actually. But Pat was just, oh, I don't know. You could just see in the way she presented, and it was just, I just couldn't keep my eyes off her when she was presenting. I just thought it was, because coming from a traditional school to a well, as Pat used to say, sit on your hands, Eileen, sit on your hands. She said, you're not, you know, not to be interfering with the children. So, but she was just a wonderful, wonderful lady. Mm.
Yeah. What would you say were the big differences between your 21 years in traditional education and then your 21 years in Montessori at Yass?
Well,
at Redgum. I mean.
yeah. Well, the thing was that in traditional school, you taught the children as a group, and I spent most of my weekends, you know, blowing up things on the wall and then making them nice and big, and colouring them in, like Peter and the Wolf story and all those sorts of stories. And with Montessori, like the materials were there. I just loved going to garage sales and fates and anywhere, op shops, to get different activities that, like, for the practical life, because there was a question there that you said, well, how, you know, if it got stale. Well, I'd go and find other different things. I didn't have to represent, but it was just different materials, different objects on the tray. And I think I just love that. I miss that terribly, really. Sometimes I get yes. If I say, well, is there anything you want? And I'll go and see if I can find them. But yeah, I love that part of it. It was just, and I think the children did, you know, they didn't get stale because of the objects were different, even though they did the same thing with the objects in.
Yeah.
Each term I would do that, yeah.
Now, you're a Sister of Mercy. Can you talk a little bit about that part of your life and how that interacted with your Montessori career?
Well, when I was 12, I had a beautiful sister, because they were most really religious in those days, way back in the 50s and 60s. And when I was 12, I had all my primary school, because we were all in the one class from 3rd grade up to 6th grade. And Sister Magella was her name. I just loved her. And then I just knew then that that's what God wanted me to do. So I didn't go straight away, which a lot of people did. I was 22 before I entered, and I went to Goulburn, and we did 2 years novitiate, and then went to Sydney and we trained in traditional learning, education. And then my first place was Yass. And then I went, so like a lot of people thought that because I was a religious, that Montessori was a religious school. And said to them, no, it's not. It's just that I happen to be trained as a Montessori teacher, really. And I've looked up our book and way back, but it was a sister from the Netherlands who started a Montessori school in Melbourne in 1913, I think it was. And I think you people would have that picture of that sister in all their black and white, and she was in a white habit. But I don't think any of, except Kathleen and I, that have done in our order. I'm not sure of any other orders because there's lots of orders. But it really didn't have anything to do. But when I got into Montessori, I could see the connection to what life I'd been leading and Montessori, and it was a different way of presenting it than I did in traditional learning, because that's what traditional learning was, and Montessori, and that's why I felt that Montessori was so much easier for me as a person. You just did one child or a little group of children. You had a group at the end of the day, but otherwise, whereas before you had children rolling around and you had to discipline them and all that was much harder, I felt. Yeah.
So Montessori blended more with your religious beliefs, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think like the peace and harmony and, kindness and all those sort of things that we all, no matter who you are, you still struggle with those sort of things. And I think the children taught me a lot, because I could sit back and watch them develop. And I think it was just fantastic for me as a person. It changed my life completely in a way. I started off.
Can you say more about that? How it changed your life?
Well, I think I wasn't trying to, I had, because you were looking after a group of, say, 25, 30. Well, I started off with 35 in Yass. On my own and kinders, and then there was about 18 months difference in age, because in those days it used to be cut-off day was the 31st of July. So you could be 4 until the 31st of July. And then you might have somebody that was maybe 6 in the February. So It was a very big age. So it was really like a Montessori school, but you didn't have the materials. That made it a lot harder. But with the materials, and once I got used to, as Pat says, sitting on your hands, well, it was so much easier. Yeah, and I didn't expect from myself. I had to trust the child more than me just sitting or standing in front of a class and teaching.
Did you ever, Montessori herself wrote a lot about religion that has not really been, I guess Montessori after the Second World War has been very secularized, but there's, catechesis of the Good Shepherd. Maybe Liz, you'd like to jump in and talk about that some more, or Vicky, but and also godly play, and did you ever look into the catechesis and how to use that in your classrooms?
Well, I did the course, but because I was teaching, I didn't, I did the 3 to 6 course, but I didn't get to really teach it. But I thought it was beautiful. Yeah. I would have loved to have been able to do it, but it just hasn't happened that I could.
Mm.
But
yeah. So then when Red Hill closed in 2015, you embarked on yet another part of your journey in Montessori. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, well, when I retired at the end of 14, May actually. I took my long service leave and finished in the May. And Sister Helen was over in Maliana in Timor, and she took another teacher from Dili. And I think I don't know whether it was a conference or something up in Thursday Island. Anyway, Amy was there and Christine was there, and Helen said something about it, wanting to, because she was setting up these little ordinary preschools in Timor, especially up in the mountains, and people would give her like toys and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, and Christine and Amy said, well, what about Eileen? And so she did get in contact with me, but at that stage I was still working. And so then when at the end of 14, and I said to her, well, I'll finish officially in May. So I went over to Timor. My first trip was on in August, and it was okay that time because Helen she was still there, but the rooms were there, and she said we'll set up one room. Well, as it turned out, it ended up 3 rooms, and they're still all going beautifully. The girls send me over photos, and we chat on WhatsApp, and so that's been really, really good. So Sister Helen could speak the language, so that was fortunate. So I took like the language and all that over, so that all had to be translated. And then I used to take things over because I went 10 times then, and then in 2016 I went 3 times. I went January, June and November, because Helen was leaving at the end of that year. And while that was happening, I was sort of presenting the materials to the girls, to the teachers. There were 6 of them. And I'd say to them all, when is it a good time to do some more learning? And they say, well, Madre, it's too hot at 3 o'clock. What about 4? I said, well, all right, 4. So off and I did so much walking. It was amazing because I didn't have a car or anything. Anyway, I'd go and they wouldn't be there. And so I'd say to them, well, now, look, come on, you need to be here. I'm only here for a month. And, anyway, finally they got the thing, because they're very laid back in a way. They were then anyway. So then gradually, the next, that's in 17, 18 and 19, I went twice each year, and gave them a month. And one, Edna Salvatore, I think her name is, she's Sydney teacher. She's just retired this year. She came over for 10 days, and she helped me with the setting up of the 3rd classroom. We had the materials there, and Maxine Swanson, I think.
Swanson, yeah.
Yeah, she came with me for nearly 3 weeks a year before. I can't remember what year that was. So that was really good. She helped a lot in the primary to get the children that had turned 6 had gone up then into which they called year 1. So, and the thing was to getting the materials over there. I bought a lady's materials that she had a home one up in Tamworth, and she moved back to Canberra, and I got those. Well, the girls in Sydney, the year 11s, they took some of the practical life over for me. So what I had to do was get the materials to Darwin, then that man would put it onto a boat, and then it would go over to Timor, and then his dad would get it off, because the fellow in Darwin was the son, and they were Timorese, but they had been brought up there, but his dad had gone back. So that went on for a couple of years, and then the dad got sick, but I lost a couple. I bought some stuff from David and Nibble, and some of that new stuff got, well, I don't know where it is. It just didn't turn up. But that was a really, really hard time. But getting the materials over there, so we just had to, like, I'd take two bags with me, 2 cases, and Qantas would be pretty good to me if I asked them, and they'd give me 2 cases so that I could take extra. I mostly took practical life things, but that was really hard, getting the materials. And then I decided that I would get my albums. I suppose it's not Montessori, but they were doing. I wasn't trained as a Montessori trainer, but I couldn't get anybody to come over. So I set about. There was a boy in Dili, and I had to type all my albums, because they were all handwritten, all printed, because he couldn't do that on the computer. So I did that and sent that over to him, and he would translate it for me. So we did up 8 sets of albums, and also he did the essays that we did at college.
Wow.
You know, like all the I don't know how many there were, quite a number. So at the end, I did ask, but they never ever got back to me. Would Montessori recognise it in some way? I knew I wasn't a proper trainer, but I thought, well, I've done it for 21 years. I should know what I was doing. But anyway, so Sarah Beresford-Jones did a nice little thing, and we gave them the certificate, and you would have thought that we gave them $1 million. It was just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And I think that was the joy of that I got, was their joy, seeing them so happy, and because the children were they're so good, or they were then. They were just craving for it. They kept saying, but why can't we go here all day? Why can't we go all day? But so it's been quite an experience. And when Sister Helen led, I was a bit worried. But anyway, the driver would come and pick me up in Dili, because I found that I could go from Canberra to Darwin. I had to wait there, and then straight on then to Dili, and that was good. And I'd stay with the sisters in Dili. They were Dominican sisters, and then I'd go out 4.5 hours it'd take for 153 kilometres. With lots of holes and, you bumped along. But, yeah, and it was good that Helen could speak. But by the time she left, the girls had a little bit of English, but we got by, so that was good. And then after, it must have been when I left, I'd left because of COVID. I didn't go over because of COVID. And one of them, she just had her third baby, and everything was fine. But the girl, that was 2019 in June, she passed away. And she would have been able to go up and train actually the girls up on the hills, But anyway, that wasn't to be. So, but they're doing a marvellous job, and they send me a photo if they get a new teacher, and I said, "Are you training them?" And yes, we are. We're training them. So it's been a great joy, really. But I would love to go back, but I just think, as I said to you earlier, Mark, I'll be 80 next year. I don't want to pick up something that's that might, I might have to battle with for the rest of my life.
So Eileen, you were recognised at the Montessori Australia Living Legend Awards last October 2023 for your work. And so because of that, I have some slides that I want to show. Maybe you can talk to some of them.
Yep. That was my farewell from Montessori. That
Red Hill.
Now that's the classroom, and there are 3 classrooms, and then the end one we made into a storeroom. But before I left in 2000, that was 2016, we moved over there at the end of in the November. And then in 2019, that end room, they cut off where the spare stuff was, and they made, because they only had a very small, what would they been? They would have, they would have been 10 or 11, I suppose. But it was just, the teacher was just a traditional. He actually had been a principal in a Catholic school and had retired. So, but since then, they've actually got another primary class like that at the other end of there. So end to end. And there's the old school. Yeah, you can't see. It's quite a lovely building. The very first building we were in, because when we had was it 2016 when I went in the January, the girls had messed up all the classes, and they took out all the 5s going on 6, because some of them were older when they started. And here were 2 good teachers with 10 children in there. So anyway, that was a bit confusing. So anyway, we finally got them back into putting the older children back into the other classes. So now they have 3s, 4s, 5s, and going on 6. Yeah. But they're nice rooms. You've got one there, Mark. Yeah. See, there's you can see the shelves there. They're like an iron, made out of iron. But since then, they've had wooden ones made. And the rooms look lovely. They really do. And we got that, that's like a felt, those mats.
Oh, yeah.
I got that in Dili. See, there's not that sort of thing in Maliana, even though it's the 3rd biggest place in Timor-Leste. So you really have to go into Dili and get, most of the things. But Yeah, they've got most. The only thing is the third class, because one set of materials got lost. A lady had given me her mother's things from here in 2018, I think it was, and it got never ever got there. It had a botany cabinet, and that. So they haven't got a botany cabinet in that third room. But I said to them, well, they can just, share the other, because they've got two. Yeah. So everything is three lots of everything.
Mm.
Look at them, aren't they beautiful? They really are. And they'd come up and they'd rub me, because, see, I was the only white person there. I think they wondered what on earth she was. But it was really good for me to see how wonderful they just get on with life.
Yeah.
And appreciate everything. I'd go down to the, to get beans and things for spooning and that, and they would just be so, the women, they'd be old women, or they looked old, but I don't think they were, and they eat this betel nut and their mouths are, their teeth and everything. But here they make buns, and what they grow in their yard, they'd be selling. And, the Monty people in Sydney told me to take lots of $1 notes, and you'd give them a brand new dollar note for whatever you bought, fruit or whatever. And it was just magic. But you didn't need to get change, because if you did, their notes would be just like an autumn leaf.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be brown and torn, and so that was really wonderful. So there's some of the, I did in June there's Helen there at the top in the pink. That's the priest in the front. That sister there, some of those people are from Dili. They came in the June of 2016. I did some work with them, and plus the girls came down from the mountains, and it was amazing what we could find. They had bottle tops for the numbers and counters.
Mm.
They just use everything that they possibly can that they have around them. Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, so, and the rest of them would have been teachers. Oh, they're kids that I taught, and they were at my farewell. Look at them. And this is Yass. This last few years I've been going over there. So last year, and they wanted me to teach them some percussion. Mm-hmm. So because I taught the kids at the children at Timor, and they're very musical. Absolutely. They don't have the bells, because I couldn't get the bells. It was too expensive, but people were wonderful around here, my parishioners and my family and my congregation. And I've still got some money left, so every year I send them some money to replenish their classrooms, and because they were using tiny little sheets of toilet paper for their tissues, and so they now have they use tissues, and it's just wonderful. They're so quick at learning, the teachers as well as the children, actually. Yeah, so it's been a wonderful experience for me.
Maxine's joined us. I don't know if you want to say anything, Maxine, about your experience there, or anybody else. If you'd like to jump in and ask a question of Eileen or make a comment, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes, we had a wonderful time, and it was good that our connections with the connections I had connecting the translator to get all that work done. And yes, that it was a really great experience to go there with Eileen on that last trip, to issue certificates to the girls. And yes, the joy to as to the work that has been done by this fabulous Montessori.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Maxine. So Eileen, you've been in education for so many decades, been in Montessori for so many decades. What do you think what advice would you have for teachers just getting into the profession? What do you think are some desirable characteristics and talents that people need to be able to be in a Montessori classroom and be successful at what they're doing?
Well, I think first of all, they need to sit on their hands, as Pat said. If they've done the training, it is hard when you've been, well, because Pat said to me when I first went, she said, if you hadn't done any other training, I would have been happy, because she said then you don't have to get rid of what I had before. But I would say that, well, we had a primary school teacher come in Melbourne and talk to us, and she was saying that when you go into a class, you have threes, 4s, 5s, and maybe some going on to 6. And so you don't know where they've come from, especially the 4s and the 5s and the 6s. Anyway, she said, when you start bringing in your own children at 3, that's when you're not hard on yourself, because you don't know what those other children were like. They could have been, who knows. But I think that was great advice for me, because, as you know, Pat died just 93. She died in January, I think it was, or June or July 95. So, I would ring her, and if I was worried about something. But that helped me, and you could see what that little person was like, whether they were very unsettled and cried and all those sorts of things. So you didn't know what the other children, and this teacher said, no, just continue with the children that are already there, just continue working with them through to the time when they're leaving. But then you'll get an idea of saying, well, it's not working, or it's this is wrong, or don't make it hard for yourself. And I think that's what a young I was 49, so but it was hard. But a young person, if they can, when they take over a class, or even if they're starting a class, it's they need to take that advice, I think. And I think, not to be too hard on themselves, that why isn't this working? But as I went on, you got, you allowing the children to be who they wanted to be, and yet they knew the rules. They knew, you couldn't run around the classroom, and the other children would come up to 3 and say, we don't do that in this classroom. It was wonderful, really, that those older children, they weren't always older children. Sometimes they were a 3-year-old that was nearly 4, and they'd be coming and telling the older ones, well, you don't do that in this classroom. So I think everybody helped each other, and I think that's a let's see what I wrote down here.
Now you talked about how it was difficult to get some of the materials to Timor-Leste. But I've heard it said that, Montessori, the real beating heart of Montessori, it's not really about the materials. It's about the attitude of the teacher. It's about the transformation of the teacher. Would you agree with that? That it's more about the attitude and the characteristics of that the teacher brings to their relationship with the
Yeah,
children.
yeah, that would be part of it. But like, as when I left in 2019 in the November, I went up there's a mall in a little mall in Dili, and I was catching the plane the next day home, and I found an educational shop up the top, and it hadn't been there before that. So I checked the lady, and she was a Chinese lady, and I went to get some hoops for the girls and send them back with the driver, hoops and balls.
Mhm.
She said, "Oh, if you can wait," she said, I will get them from our warehouse. So I wandered around, and she had the cylinder blocks and the construction triangle boxes. And I said to her when she came back, I said, "Do you realise you've got Montessori materials?" She didn't have a clue. She said, "But if you want them," she said, "I will get them from China for you." So that would have been much easier if I'd have known that, well, she wasn't there. So, but if it happened now, I suppose that you could, that's if she's still there, of course. But I think, when I first went there, Helena had trucks and, with a bit of string on the front of the truck, and they were pushing around these trucks and all that. So gradually we just took those out of the classroom, and because I'd take a fair bit with me, and a practical life was mostly practical life. And as I said, the girls from Sydney, they took, although going over to Maliana, they lost some of the things, fell off the bus. You wouldn't want to go on a bus. It's one of those little, I don't know, probably 15, 20 seater. And they have all this stuff up on the top, and they wouldn't let me go on it. They said, "No, we won't. We'll take you in and out." So, but I used to like going in and out too much because it just tired you out so much.
So
But
when you were training teachers in Timor-Leste, how did you convey that idea of the transformation of the teacher, bringing a different way of interacting with children that you learned from Pat Hilson? How did you bring that to those teachers?
when we were training, as you know, when you do presentations, there's not a lot of talk, so that was good in that way. But when they got into their classroom, they would be yelling because there were two teachers, and they'd be yelling. So we'd practice then, and I'd practice it because I'd be in the classroom with them, and I got them to. I said to them, "You need to walk up to the other teacher. If you want to say something, you need to tap their shoulder and then just say something quietly." So gradually that happened. It was really good. Because they've got fairly loud voices, and they were so used to, yelling from one thing, because that's what they do. When I went up to the church where there was a school, and I could hear the kindergartens. It was, oh dear, it was loud. So that's but once they knew what to do, it took a while, but and then of course the children just calmed right down, which was, except that the teachers were a lot louder than the children. The children were quite good because I think it was all new to them, and they just loved doing it. We couldn't have food activities because there's not much water there, the water's out in a big cement thing, and it's not really, you can't, wash up in that sort of thing. But we had floor washing and clothes washing and hand washing and, all those sorts of things. I tried to do as many. I guess if Maxine had been at Red Hill, she would have said it was a little Red Hill classroom, except for things that we tried to get of Timor, things that helped them, that were, because they didn't have knives and forks and things like that. I think they mostly eat with their fingers, and it was. So the teachers really, it took them a little while, and some of them were quicker than others. But
what are some of the other ways that you had to adapt Montessori to fit the culture in that environment in Timor-Leste?
Well, see, they had to have their meal. They had a cook, and she would do rice, and they had these, a bit like what do you call them, Red Runner, but they'd cut that up and that'd be the meat, and then so they did all that together. So we tried to get the 3-hour cycle as much as we could, but you couldn't with the food because that had to be. So I was trying to get them to, but the thing was, it was rice and, it was hot. So that was hard too. So we had to change that. Like at Red Hill, we had activities where they could just choose like a banana peeling, and we had a little bun. Actually, I met a boy the other day, and he said, "We still talk about our bun, Eileen." He said, when we were little. So they, those buns that you put in the oven for a little while to heat up.
Wow.
Yeah, and things, you couldn't do things like that with them, but that was because of the water situation. So we had painting and that outside. They had a little place where they could do that, and the washing was outside. Sweeping, we tried to, because they don't mostly sweep at home because a lot of their floors are just dirt. But their school had needed to be swept. So, and gradually, as I went over the 5 years I was going over, the houses from the little, leaf sort of houses, they've moved, a lot of them have going in now to, they get the big, very big bricks from Indonesia, and they're building these little grey brick places. So, but
Eileen, how do you think that the Montessori education has affected the lives of those people in Timor-Leste?
Well, the girl said to me the other day, Ophelia, who's the sort of the leader now that Melania died, she sort of said, "Madre, we need 2 more classes." And I said, "Darling, I can't start 2 more classes now." So because they've got over 100 children come every year. But see, because there's only so many go up, there's not that thing. So I said, well, you need to put them on a waiting list, and don't take 4s and 5s. Only take 3-year-olds, and then see if father will give you a 3rd teacher, and have, say, 35 in the class. See how that works, because at the moment they've got 33 and 2, and they're just about worn out, I think. But even though they're young, they're only in their 30s now, so they're not old people.
So you're saying there's a lot of demand for Montessori?
Yeah, they say that, they keep saying But Madre, we get parents, they hear that our children are reading and they hear that, they can do this. They want their children to come to our school, But, I don't think I could start raising money again and trying to get equipment over there. But I don't know what people would think that are there, like 5 classes. That's a lot, isn't it? For one school, 5 preschools. I would have loved to have started an under 3s, to get even the parents going then, but COVID came and it didn't happen. But
do you think, Eileen, do you think Montessori is as relevant in Australia as it has been in Timor-Leste?
Well, I loved it. I really, I think I think it's the only way. When people say things to me, I say, well, that's the way to learn. But of course, it's so expensive. That's the problem, isn't it? It's if we could just get the government to to fund it a bit, especially the 3s and 4s.
Yeah.
4-year-olds that, and it's I just wouldn't, I just wouldn't even think of going the other traditional way at all now.
Yeah. So do you think that Montessori is not better known in Australia because it's so expensive, or do you think there are other reasons as well?
Well, it's probably part of it. But like it's even in Timor, they pay, when I first started, it was $5. They're American money. It's $7 now. And see, some people can't even afford that. So I sponsor a couple of little children over there, up until when they're 3. Then they 5, 6. Then they can go on at Maliana, or they can go to the public school or a Catholic school. I don't know how I'm not sure now whether they're getting much money from government or what. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's sad if it is money, because it would be money, because schools aren't going to take children that are not paying.
Yeah.
That's the sad part, because I think all children should be able to have that experience, even if it was 3 to 6. Well, but like Montessori at Canberra now, they're 18 months. So they get, but the school that I went to the other day, which is a long day care, they're from tiny little babies. As I was saying to you, those tiny little people were sitting on this mat and not moving. I couldn't believe it. And the advantage for them is that those children then go up, and they go up in the one school. So she said they're not, some 5-year-olds leave. They go to an ordinary school, which is fine. They're probably there from 5 weeks old. So that's the advantage of their love. It's a lovely environment. But I don't know what their fees and that are. They must be very high, I would imagine. But even Montessori, and where over at Holder, must be expensive now. It was $600 when I started for 3s and 4s, because the 5's got some money from the government. But I think it must be nearly $2,000. I don't know.
Does anybody else listening have any comments or questions you'd like to ask?
I was just wondering if other parts of Timor-Leste have seen the school and expressed an interest, or is it just a very localised program?
I don't know. The sisters would know about it. There's a group of sisters, so if they were in and moved to another town, they would know. I would know. I would think that most people know about it. Would you reckon, Maxine?
Well, I was just going to come in on something else. I don't really know about that, but what I do know, we have somebody training at the moment, Gabrielle, here in Sydney. He's coming over. I've got a bag of things that I want to give to him before he goes back this time. But I'm quite keen to actually, between now and the end of the year, of going and visiting him. He's in Delhi, and going up to Maliana for a couple of days or whatever. It's just arranging all that accommodation and what we had and how to get up there. It's one heck of a ride, I can tell you, everybody. The road, sometimes it's 18 inches. You've got to go on a four-wheel drive, even though there's supposed to be highways, but the ground keeps moving. That's the big problem. They put a road through, and then there's a landslide, and it's slow going and it's rough, very rough. I know there was a need when I came back. There was a pastor that our driver introduced me to. He'd come up actually the day before to see us and wanted, because he had disabled people. He was about an hour out of Delhi. And I was hoping to get back there, but COVID hit, didn't it? But maybe between now and the end of the year, I'm planning probably to go back and see those that I do know in Delhi and go up and see those in Maliana, because your heart gets left there. I know that.
So if there are people who are watching or listening, to the recording in future who would like to donate materials or money to the project in the school in Timor-Leste, please contact Montessori Australia, and we will make sure that that gets forwarded on to Maxine and Eileen and others who are working up there. Eileen, thank you so much for your time this evening. It's been such a wonderful experience hearing about your journey, your long Montessori journey in its various chapters. So I hope to see you again at the this year's Living Legend Recognition Awards as well in Sydney.
Thank you. No, I was very nervous, and I'm not a public speaker, but anyway, it was good. Yeah, thank you for inviting me, Mark. And as I said, I tried different primary Montessori ones that I knew, like ones that had been here and gone back to their country. They were over at Holder or Yarralumla, and but they couldn't, and I couldn't expect somebody like them to do what I could do. Got no family. I have got a family, but I haven't got an immediate family, and I was free to go over. And like at the moment, I'm looking after a sick sister, so but others would fill in for me if I needed. But I'm just worried that I might pick up something, and I don't really want to live the rest of my life with something that can be avoided, because they're doing well. The hard thing is getting them to understand me. They if they got to build a new, because I said if they want 2 more classrooms, that means they've got to have 4 more teachers, and you have to train them. Although there's one that would be 5, so there's one that I trained could go into each class with a new assistant or another assistant.
Yeah. Well, you did such fantastic work over there. So thank you for all that you've done for Montessori in Australia and in Timor-Leste. And thanks everybody for joining us tonight for Montessori Lives. See you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.